Good morning, everyone, again. This is the second of the series where we're looking at how Teilhard talks about dynamic cosmic love being inside and outside and round about everything in the universe. And this particular video is about how we can invoke moving into a dynamic relationship with this dynamic love energy. And so the title of this video is The Eye and Ear of My Heart in Dynamic Cosmic Love. Again, the sources. Robert Bly wrote a little book on the human shadow, and that made sense for me, and he has like a long bag over the shoulder, so I've lived into that happening for me. Cynthia Bourget has a diagram from Thomas Keating on page 136 of her book, Centering Prayer and Inner Awakening. Richard Rohr and Andreas Ebert have books on the Enneagram, and I really could take on and see the energies in myself and see my energies being called forth by various universal morsels of truth in their two books. And another book, which is self-published by Bruce Stevens, Hidden Learning, gave me so much more insight into shadow in the detail of how we take on these patterns below our awareness. And so, what do I mean by the eye of my heart? My inner reviewing self perspective. And so what's that? How my core being is in relationship with love, the big picture of love, this dynamic cosmic energy love that Teilhard brought to our attention as being real. So we obviously have a conscious and an unconscious. And again, you will notice that the bolt has the tip of it at the end, because there's more in our unconscious, a lot more than in our conscious. So, this is Robert Johnson. When human life is in balance, now we all want that, the conscious mind and the unconscious live in relationship. Is that surprising to you? Another comment by Johnson in Inner Work. The unconscious is a marvellous universe of unseen energies, forces, and intangible, though real, parts of us. A bit like the quasar we did details of in video 1. And another phrase of Johnson, which I have lived to the ultimate of my human capacity, is to get a true sense of who we are, to become more complete and integrated human beings, we must listen to the unconscious and set up communication with it. And in my personal experience, that is not in my culture. So it is a stretching edge even to take that on as a truth. So my witnessing of how these patterns named by Johnson play out is: 1. Pause and take notice of what the unconscious is inviting us to be present to. Details follow. And a second thing, partly from Johnson and partly from me. Much of ourselves and many determinants of our character are potential contained in the unconscious. We nourish this potential when it germinates through stretching edge inner invitations, sleeping and waking dream energy, wisdom, imagination, symbols, and sometimes we have something comes out and we say, where did that come from? It wasn't from our intellectual intelligence. Inspirations. What attracts our inner attention? Noticing rhythmic patterns. You can see there's a whole universe, and when we're made aware of it, there are many ways that the unconscious is inviting us to be in relationship with it. At the heart of it is inner disturbances. So we're going to be present to that in detail here. This is a diagram by Thomas Keating, which is about emotional programs for happiness based on institutional needs from early childhood. So in early childhood, we have a need for power and control, for affection, and for security and safety, survival. Now, those are needs that are in our unconscious. And in our reality of living, none of those are served perfectly, and some of them less perfectly than others. And so these needs then come up into consciousness. And I have it circled and in pink because I have put preferences and don't likes. Preferences are the things we like, that we've enjoyed at this emotional level, and don't likes are the things that are missing. Keating had aversions and attachments, but I've used preferences and don't likes because I can get a handle on it better. Then in his diagram, you follow along, because we have preferences and don't likes as we experience life, we've actually got a hidden agenda of that happening. And when it doesn't happen, we will have frustration turning up. And when that frustration happens, if we just let it go, it'll go on to emotional turmoil. And if the frustration was anger or revenge or payback, well, that will be reinforced. That it'll come up again with stronger anger, jealousy, revenge, payback. Okay, so what happens if we reinforce the patterns? Again, I have some metaphors for that. I invite you to go through each one of these. Have you experienced them? Maybe these ones trigger up one for you. A very brief time for you to revisit one of these that turned up in your life. So, Keating used frustration, but I make it broader than Keating's, which is disturbances. And so I've even expanded that over at the side. We have experience of disturbance, but sometimes it's unsettling, which is another form of disturbance, and sometimes it's discomfort. And when we experience any version of those, it's an invitation to take notice. that's not in our culture either. Now, Keating has place where change can happen. And I'm adding place where change can happen and balancing can be activated, because often disturbance, unsettling and discomfort come up when something is out of balance within our inner patterns. So, what happens when we experience some form of disturbance, unsettling and discomfort? If we want to go with the change that we're invited to make, or to come to more balance in a pattern that or attitude or value that we become comfortable with. Pausing and sorting for inner invitations. And if we do that, we'll transcend the disturbance. We'll come to more than the disturbance. Disturbance will be a stepping stone to something good. And so I invite you to look at some of the outcomes here. I'm going to name them, and as I name them and you look at the image, you may resonate with one or more of them. Free, balanced, confident, have equanimity, living happily in flow with life. Isn't it great to live with one or more of those? They don't just float out of the sky. They need to be invoked. So now, I'm expanding Keating's pattern to much more of what's in our shadow, and it's all about emotional reality that's there, that eventually comes into consciousness. So we have a golden shadow. Those are giftings and submerged greatness, hidden learnings that we can say thank you and respect other people. That if your parents didn't have much expression of affection, you're likely to pick that up. But also, some of those patterns of anger, revenge, payback can also be ways that you cope with life. Moving to just behind the stick man, this long bag over the shoulder has things that we don't like, that we're rejected, that we're unaware of, that we haven't dealt with. That's emotional residue, which comes from, as we experience life, we have fear, trauma, we're pointing the finger at people, not taking responsibility, we've got scratchy energy, we have pools of pain. Those are some of the details of what's in this long bag over the shoulder. And you'll notice the images above that list. Emotional reality, going into emotional residue. And sometimes that residue is because at the time, to cope with life, we aren't able to face it. And there's where that caring energy is at work at our unconscious level. And so, these things that are built up. So we get triggered. And triggering often happens well after the events of the emotional residue being set up. So there are two things. We call it projection, energies getting triggered off from undealt energies in the unconscious. So there are two ways that we can have that fire within us where we load it onto other people. There are also many experiences in our life where other people are loading onto us. And so that sets up more emotional residue. So that's all at the unconscious. And then at the right time for us, they arise. So arise into consciousness as preferences, don't likes, which was in Keating's diagram. However, invitations, inspirations, and other messages, tingles, clangs, niggles, nudges, jolts, that move us to expand our consciousness, our patterns, our attitudes. And a summary is above that. Inner invitations, inner discomfort, frustrations, all have the potential emotionally for us to take notice of. And if we follow Keating's diagram as it goes around without the 5A, we will find that we'll be run by unconscious negative patterns like anger, frustration, payback. And thus we deepen the shadow elements. We reinforce the programs of inner need. But Keating said at 5A that we can change the pattern. It's a place to pause. So if we pause and become aware, then we can choose whether we go into that train of being run by our unconscious negative patterns, or we can become aware of inner stretching edge invitations and say yes to them. And not only for each invitation, but if we have a stance that inner disturbances often have a stretching edge invitation embedded in them, what happens is we'll become more whole. And I love Robert Johnson's word, made holier. Renewal, rebirth, transformation, and many other words for when we move to becoming our best self. And so saying yes and having that stance will lead to more being added to our golden shadow. And as it's added to our golden shadow, it comes back into life from who we are, more balanced, more healed, with more inner freedom. And so it indirectly allows golden shadow to come to consciousness. And that's a gift for yourself and for others. And really, that's releasing love energy in the world. That energy that Teilhard was talking about. And as we release it, that is expanding the uncontained fullness of love in our universe, energetic-wise. So we come to the heart of it. Preferences, desires, and choices. Now, at the heart of us, in the unconscious, and how we respond as things come up from the unconscious, rather than the needs bit, we have a core invitation or calling. Now, I'm going to go around the cycle of words there, and I'm inviting you just to relax inside you, hear the word, and when I'm finished the 9, you'll probably find one that appeals to you a bit more, that resonates as being true for you. A core invitation or calling. It was originally unconscious and it's coming into consciousness. And when I say it, you may never have named it before, but you may be able to, yeah, that's for me. Growth, freedom, hope, originality, being right aware of who I am uniquely, wisdom, faith, realism, being practical, mercy, reaching out, love. Now, if one of those appealed to you or another one turned up for you, take a pause now and go a bit deeper, and you'll find that underneath that there is a more elusive undercurrent of inner desire. So this is desire, a lifelong quest. And I'll read again these words, and maybe one of them or more will appeal to you, will attract your attention more than the other. Wisdom, understanding, love, power, beauty, endurance, majesty, foundation, presence. Then if you get an inner invitation and you don't want to do it and you dig your heels in, not that in between times where you're saying, will I, won't I, but when you come to know, to something you know is a stretching edge invitation for you, root temptations. There will be a temptation. So when you are digging your heels in, see if one of these words is how it is for you. Anger, pride, hiding away, not wanting to be true to yourself. Envy, avarice, fear, anxiety, intemperance, gluttony, shamelessness, lust, immobility, frozen. And sometimes frozen can look like laziness, but it's not laziness, it's that you're frozen. Probably laziness named by people outside you. And then if you go, will I, won't I, and you just don't do it. And you know, I've met people and myself delayed saying yay or nay, sat on the fence. You don't get off free either. Hypersensitivity, flattery, obliging people beyond what's right for you. Vanity, a superficial vision of life. Depression, a sad aspect of view of life. Emotional stinginess, cowardice, recklessness, scheming, revenge, lethargy, hanging on to something because it's the easy way out, comfort. And if you say yes to stretching edge invitations, all of these lists come from Raw and Ebert. Cheerful tranquility, patience, humility, truthfulness, honesty, consistency, balance, objectivity, courage, sober joy, innocence, action. They're the best so far of the root tendencies and the pitfalls. So maybe out of the listing, an encouragement to say, yes, but you may be able to resonate with some of those in that column, and so you know that you say yes pretty often. And then in saying yes, we'll come to a mature attitude, and that's what I mean, having deepened our spirituality, a phrase that I used in video 1. And here are some of the words, the feelings, the emotional realities, the patterns that come from saying yes pretty often to stretching edge invitations. To be critically aware. Now, that does not mean your critical self, but it means you can look at something and weigh up, is it worthwhile or is it not, both from a living area as well as from your integrity area. That you can be yourself. You don't have to depend on other people. That you're a reliable person. Creative. Creativity oozes out of you. Doesn't have to ooze, but there's a creativity. You feel worthwhile. That you can cope with life inventively. Confident that, again, you can face the difficulties of life knowing that you will be doing the best that you can. Versatile, not straitjacket. And we all need to be versatile because life does not turn out the way we want it. Protective of your rights and other people's rights. Accepting the way it is. Peaceable. And so, those are some of the attitudes we can have, which I put under my inner reviewing self perspective. And now the ear of my heart. Notice it's got a hearing aid. And the hearing aid, and this is what ties it in balance. When I pause at an experience of inner disturbance, I'm enabled to hear inner invitations for growth. And they will bring me to more balance, more healing, more equanimity, more inner freeing. And that is living deep spirituality, and we're equipped to do that. We've got inbuilt human capacities. And so something about that. Before we come to the capacities, we all have emotional residue, a power to choose, a monitoring self, which is like the heat. You put on clothes when you're cold, or you go to a cool place, or put on the fan when you're hot. We've got a monitoring self, not only in those practical things, but in our inner self as well. Emotions and feelings, muscular. And we have a critical self. And again, that's not your inner critic. It's a self that can judge what's right for you. And sometimes it goes against your feelings. We also have sensory memory. In that slide of shadow, you could see what's held in the unconscious, what's got added to the unconscious. And so we can't hold that all in our forefront of our consciousness. We have good forgetteries. And everything we do falls into a neural pathway. So most of what we do goes into neural pathways. So if you normally turn yourself to the sun when you wake up, that'll become a pattern, and there'll be a part of you that misses it if you don't do it. We've got many intelligences, but 3, which we have, when they work in tandem, are essential for pausing, listening in the pauses, and hearing sorting out inner stretch edge invitations for growth. So these are the capacities. Pause and make inner space. I've invited you to do that today. Invoke inner reviewing self. Again, I've invited you today. Notice and integrate aspects of our inner reality. We did that in the listings. Comprehend more expansively. Well, I hope that your understanding of how you connect with this cosmic love energy that Teilhard was naming, I hope that's expanded a bit. Experience vicariously. Well, this whole series has been about me telling the story of what appealed to me, what caught my attention, that I lived into. And I'm fairly sure that there'll be 1 or 2 things, at least for you, that will be triggered with a different flavour from me. Everyone's story is everyone else's story with a different flavour. And there's much more communication than is possible in words. And that's been here, image, symbol, and metaphor. So, that's what I call self-encounter. There's a universe within us. I'm not detailing it. We've been talking about the universe within us. And underneath that, there's an encouragement to come to our best self. And that's a caring beyond our knowing, which Teilhard named. And as we move in tune with these inner stretching edges of invitations that are for growth, there will be healing. And the point is, the healing trigger turns up when we can cope. Many times, because at the time of the experience, we couldn't cope. And my last part of the summary is, if we take notice, pause, take notice of inner invitations, say yes to them, we will be co-sculpting the treasure of who we are becoming. And now I'm doing that summary with words. More than us love energy, vital impulse, is initiating within and ahead of us by juggling patterns. In the first half of life, we have patterns that go out of balance. At the right time for us, inner invitations will invite us to bring balance to those patterns. Invitations we've been talking about. My freedom to choose is not punishment if you say no, but there are consequences in your emotional reality. And things happen in your life. You might have a car accident, you might get sick. Good things happen to you, so there are impingings on your life. And all the time, through all of that, there's this underlying current through stretching edge invitations to call you to wholeness. The part that blows my mind is this all happens so easily at that bigger level. At whatever stage of awareness I'm at, you at, everyone is at, unique to each person. And everyone, whether they are conscious of it or not, invited to become more healed, more whole, more inner freedom. So, Teilhard's words are so relevant to what inner journeying is about for each of us. It's an experience of a vital impulse that initiates balance, healing and growth from within us and ahead of us in a way that gives us the potential to experience a dream outcome far beyond our imagining possibility. And I'm quoting Teilhard's words. Only God could say what this new spirit gradually forming with us will be. Give God the benefit of believing that God's hand is leading you, and accept the anxiety of feeling yourself in suspense and incomplete. Indeed, to engage consciously within a journeying within these frameworks explicated by Teilhard means that we have been a significant element of a partnership which mutually lifts the other to a higher possession of their own being. The we part of it are becoming more balanced, more healed, more fulfilled. At the same time, each one of us, even though a relatively small element of love energy, is an intrinsic part of expanding love in the uncontained fullness of cosmic love, vital impulse reality. And so I finish with, we are all harnessing for the universe energies of love. And that especially happens when we pause and say yes to inner stretching edge invitations that are for growth.